you very much, Dennis Otieno, with that piece about that staple food in Kenyan homes. I am sure somebody will be doing something about it pretty soon so that Kenyans' minds are settled down. Now, on Monday, while launching the Committee on Criminal Justice Reforms in Kenya at the Supreme Court, Kenya's head of judiciary, the Chief Justice David Maraga, seemed to confirm a concern that has always been raised by quite a number of Kenyans for quite a while now. The issue about the poor finding their way to jail for petty crimes and the rich cruising in our highways with their heavy loads. Now, he seemed to allude also to the fact that it is clear that the scale of justice seems to be tilting more in favor of the rich than the poor. The Chief Justice also talked about the issue of more young people between the ages of 18 and 35 being in remand prisons awaiting trial. And he said that it seems our laws have not reformed fast enough to be able to embrace the youth. And that is why in the course of seeking their livelihoods and socializing, the youth find themselves in conflict with the law all the time. To help us understand this, put it into perspective, and probably get an understanding as to why this is the situation, I am now joined on the set by Mr. Kakai Kissinger, who is a human rights activist and an attorney. Mr. Kakai Kissinger was a director of IMLU for a while and also acted as Chief Registrar of the Judiciary from around 2013. Mr. Kissinger, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for welcoming me.
So it's clear what people have been saying. If you steal a chicken, you will rot in jail. If you loot billions, you will cruise in our highways.
I think it's good that you are bringing up this question, and so that we put it into perspective. We must start by, as lawyers, saying that the judicial system and the law must operate equally. Must operate equally because it's created for Kenyans. It's not created for a certain sector of Kenyans, whether you are rich or whether you are poor. So first of all, we have to understand that. The nature in which our constitution, our criminal procedures, and all criminal laws in this country is to act in a way that is fair to everybody. Now, the challenge we find ourselves in, and that's what was happening that was brought up by the CJ, is that there's something called ignorance of the law. Now, ignorance of the law, we say, is not a defense. So you realize that most people who commit crimes, or most people who do what we call petty crimes, are not aware that those are actually crimes. And therefore, they are not able to understand that let me avoid doing this crime so that I don't find myself on the wrong side of the law. So the perspective or the perception that only the rich are able to navigate around the law is because sometimes those who have gone to school and well-schooled are able to understand that this is a crime and this is not a crime, and how will I avoid it.
They know how to plan a crime.
They know how to plan a crime. They will know how to defend themselves. Because, for example, those who do crimes or find themselves in crime and are well educated are able to hire the best of lawyers in town, and therefore they are able to defend themselves properly before a court of law. However, some of these people, and you rightly mentioned, I was a director for IMLU for many years, and we used to have what we call prison reforms. And we'll go around prisons to do civic education to prisoners. And most of them found themselves in prison not because they knew what they were doing was a crime. It was not, they didn't know it was a crime. Then, number two, they never sought legal advice or counsel to defend them. Some of these prisons are not created for criminals. These prisons are for everybody. Anybody can find themselves in. But the question is, before you find yourself in, are you able to stand up and defend yourself arguably and say that although this was something I did it because of 1, 2, 3, and you're able to defend yourself and convince a court or a judge that you're actually not a criminal. So some of these things is because of ignorance that happens to it.
So it is, I would be right if I say to be poor is a crime.
No.
Because when you're poor, you can't know. When you don't know, you can't plan a crime. When you can't plan a crime, you will go in for a petty offense. When you're rich, you will plan, you will get the best lawyer.
To be poor is not a crime. What is the criminal element in all this is ignorance. Ignorance is no defense in law. And therefore, we need to understand ourselves that which are these institutions or mechanisms that are supposed to be established to teach people that this is a crime, this is not a crime. We have the penal code, for example. How many Kenyans walking on the streets understand what a penal code is? How many of them know what a crime is? How many of them know that, for example, picketing is a crime? So some of these things are...
Is picketing a crime?
No, picketing, of course, without some conditions, but in terms of picketing itself, it doesn't become a crime itself. But if you picket without, for example, seeking the authority of the police and assisting them, it becomes...
Is it authority or the knowledge?
The knowledge of the police that we want to picket, please come and provide us security. If you don't inform them, then it becomes a crime. Yes. So some of these things are enshrined in the law, but we do not have information to know or to actually be aware that you can stop them or you can avoid this or you can seek for permission. So some of these things is just the issue of not knowing the law and therefore doing something without knowing the law.
So who is to blame here that a big number of Kenyans actually don't know the law?
It takes two sides. One, Kenyans themselves. The laws are created by Kenyans. The laws are created by our members of parliament. We as electors elected them to parliament to form and create laws for us. The laws have been published. They have been enshrined into instruments. They have been enshrined into the constitution. They have been enshrined into various acts of law. Pick it up. Pick the constitution. Pick the penal code. Pick the criminal procedure code. Read them as a Kenyan. Understand what it is. If you are doubting, ask someone who has gone to school. What does this mean? Is it a crime? Is it not a crime? How do I avoid it? For example, Sexual Offences Act. Sexual Offences Act is very elaborate in terms of the offences that are created there by virtue of someone committing a sexual offence. Do we as Kenyans know, for example, that when a woman has been defiled or raped, should they, the first thing they ought to do, according to the law, to run and go and seek medical opinion. Do not even clean yourself. Do not even change your clothes. Do not even change your clothes. But they will clean themselves because it's shame. They will change their clothes because it's shameful, and that's washing away evidence. So those are the very basic things that the law has created, but we Kenyans have not internalized them to understand that this leads to a conviction.
Now, when you're told 53% of people who went to law school failed the Council of Legal Education exams between 2009 and 2016. People who went to a law school failed an exam. How do you expect somebody who has never stepped into a law school to understand the law? You
know, fortunately for me, I also teach at the Kenya School of Law. I'm a lecturer at the Kenya School of Law, and I've taught there for quite some time, on and off. And I'll understand where you're coming from in terms of lawyers who are at the law school failing exams.
And going on to practice. Yesterday we saw in the news the 53% who failed the exams between 2009 and 2016 are actually practicing in law firms, at the universities, in organizations, parastatals, etc.
And that's our biggest challenge in terms of our legal profession. But there are mechanisms, and the Council for Legal Education are addressing this issue. The disconnect between the Kenya School of Law and the Council for Legal Education, the challenges that are there, how students find themselves there and failing examination and practicing. These are issues that mechanisms have been established to settle it out. It has been a big problem in this country. However, that doesn't remove us from the fact that an ordinary Kenyan ought to understand what the law is. An ordinary Kenyan ought to understand what his civic rights are. An ordinary Kenyan needs to understand how, when I find myself in a crime, how do I seek for legal opinion? If I don't have legal opinion, if I'm taken to court, what are the baby steps I'll do in terms of defending myself in a court of law? What are the baby steps I'll do if you backtrack to avoid finding yourself in that legal challenge? So we have to separate this, that there's the legal profession, the lawyers themselves, who have their own challenges in terms of passing the Council of Legal Education exams. That's another matter. But what is the crop of lawyers compared to ordinary citizens? Ordinary citizens are more than the lawyers in this country. So we need to understand that these crimes are there. These crimes are enshrined in law. We need to know how do we then avoid committing those crimes. The statutes are there, the laws are there. We need to encourage. So institutions that are meant to deal with civic education, institutions that are meant to deal with educating Kenyans on the laws, because we have so many NGOs, we have so many other organizations that deal with this kind of thing, should enhance and find out themselves why are we finding that the majority of those who are in prison are people from a cadre in society that is low, and why they find themselves there. And that's, I think, the whole aspect that the CJ was talking about.
So if I have money, or when I have money, no matter what crime I have committed, I can evade justice?
No, that's not true.
I can hire the best lawyers?
You can hire the best lawyers.
Who can find a way of circumventing justice?
But remember, that's not true. What is true is that the law applies equally. What's true that crimes are universal. all over in this country and all over the world and all over Africa. What is true that
Bwana Kissinger, how do you tell me the law applies equally to everybody when a chicken thief is sent to jail for 6 months and somebody who steals 10 billion shillings is walking free, and ultimately the courts decide that the investigating authority was not in office legally at that time?
You see
and yet he's told, and everybody knows he's told.
No, you see, what you are saying is that he's told. You yourself, you are not a lawyer. You yourself, you are not a judge. You are not so sure to actually be able to tell that this person committed a crime. There are those things that can be said in public or talked about in public, which are just general. But when you go to now, the law is about facts, and the law is about evidence. So you may claim that somebody stole, but actually when you go to facts and evidence, you realize that this is not.
He didn't steal, he took.
He didn't. He didn't even take, he didn't even steal, he didn't even touch it. So the law, that's what I'm saying, the law applies equally. That who is being claimed that stole 10 million, if the law is there and a judge sits or a magistrate sits and they notice they never stole, they will not take you to prison. You are acquit where there's no sufficient evidence. If you stole the chicken, and it's proved you stole the chicken, you will be taken in. So it's all about the law, it's all about the evidence, what's presented by court. Remember, institutions are independent, judiciary is independent, everywhere is independent.
So the judiciary deals entirely with evidence?
Evidence and facts.
So if this evidence is tampered with at the investigative stage,
that's not a matter.
Then it is out of the judiciary's
Exactly.
hands.
Because remember that there's a criminal element. There's a criminal justice system. The criminal justice system is also about the judiciary alone. The criminal justice system involves so many other institutions. And every institution must play a specific role towards that element of a crime that is being investigated. If it's the CID, they must do their work. If it's the police, they must do their work. If it's the DPP, they must do their work. Before, the judiciary is the last arbiter of a legal dispute. In terms of a judiciary, they sit there, a judge sits there, a magistrate sits there, just to listen to the evidence, nothing else, and will make a decision based on
the evidence adduced.
Yes.
Talk about the issue of the youth as we wind up this. Chief Justice Maraga alluded to the fact that 75% of the youth between ages of 18 and 35 18 and 35 youths, almost 75% of the people in prison and remands awaiting trials and all the rest. And it goes further to say that this is because our laws have not reformed quickly enough to appreciate the social life of the young ones and their ways of seeking livelihood.
Exactly, and that's a societal problem. It's a societal problem in this country whereby you ask yourself, what is the youth? The age bracket of the youth, I think, is defined up to 35 years old. So you realize that when these youthful people are out there, they need to be engaged. So crime has some attributing factors that leads to crime. And one of them is, for example, lack of job opportunities, lack of employment. A youthful person walking on the streets without a job will be tempted to do something because he must make a living. So those are some of the societal problems that we have to deal with. And that's why we have to understand that there's nothing, for example, an institution that is meant to arbitrate these disputes can do about it. It's about pushing it back to the relevant ministries. We have the Ministry of Youth in this country. I think they should be dealing with this kind of a thing. So it's a societal problem that must be addressed.
Thank you very much, Kakai Kissinger, human rights activist and attorney, former acting Chief Registrar of the Judiciary, 2013 to what?
14.
To 2014.
Thank you.
Quite insightful. You need to know the law as a common citizen. Know what is right, know what is wrong, know how to avoid what is wrong so that you don't find yourself on the wrong end of the law. We'll be taking a short commercial break, and when we come back, we look at what's making headlines in the dailies, and later on putting them into perspective, especially the news, with Dr. Pamela Odhiambo, Member of Parliament, Migori County, and Gabriel Muduma, who is a political analyst.